Hello, I'm Daria Lamb, joining you from New York today, and I'm excited to welcome you to an opportunity to learn from practitioners. The theme of this session is making foresight urgent, and you're going to have a chance to meet two wonderful practitioners who have taken on the challenge of what do you do when you want to have people take action on foresight, but you're not the boss, you're not the CEO, the chief of staff, the executive director. And what are the possibilities for engaging people to start thinking about the future, engaging with the future? And in this case, both of our guests actually have substantial pieces of foresight they want to share with people and get people to engage with and take action. So you're going to meet two fabulous members of the foresight community out in the wild, one from Costa Rica and one from Washington, D.C. So let me start with just introducing Kara Kunzman, who works for aerospace.org. And Kara, why don't you just come and say hello and tell us a little bit about your role, and then we'll get into your project work later. But first, just nice to see you. Great to have you here.
Yeah, nice to see you too. And thanks everybody for having me. It's been such an incredible journey here the last few days. And really kudos to IFTF for making such an interactive event. I've had a lot of fun in some of the social settings. And of course, the kits that you guys have sent are just really fun and amazing. And they've really gotten me thinking in a variety of ways and pulling on those future, mindsets. Yeah, so just a bit of a background about myself. So I'm our lead futurist here at the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at the Aerospace Corporation. And really my whole focus is on trying to make the space enterprise move forward with an abundant mindset, a futures mindset, so that we really can bring security, prosperity, and abundance to the space enterprise. And so
and what do you define the space enterprise as?
Oh, I mean, pretty much anything that touches space is impacted by space and goes to space. So whether, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but whether you know it or not, I mean, if you eat food, if you have electricity, if, everything really is connected to space, and it impacts all of our lives. It enables a lot of immense capability in our lives that we take for granted. And there's just such an abundant future that many of us are not thinking about. So I'm really excited to kind of walk through that today.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to swap to Paola now. I'd like to introduce Paola Bulgarelli, and she's joining us today from Costa Rica. And Paola, I would love to hear first just a little bit about your role. What do you do in Costa Rica? What's the urgent mission in Costa Rica? And then we'll spend a couple of minutes together hearing about the project that you're using to try to make people understand urgent foresight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daria, and all the IFTF team for this opportunity. And yes, for all the different speakers that you have been having, it's really nice to feel like we are back to normal, having this great event, even though we are virtual. So as Daria says, I'm from Costa Rica, and I work as part of CINDE. And CINDE for us is the Investment Promotion Agency in Costa Rica. So pretty much what we do is to bring companies to create jobs, to make sure that we keep Costa Rica, we keep positioning Costa Rica as a talent place. So I always said that that's like the definition, but for me, I work on transforming life. I work on changing mindsets. I work with inclusion and technology and education, because a country of 5 million people really seeing us as a very innovative and different country. We have to be quite concerned about the future and things like that, but that's what we do.
And just for the record, Jake Dunnigan, the head of IFTF's Governance Futures Lab, he says that 5 million is like the sweet spot for a country. So like Norway, Costa Rica, so enjoy it. So we have a slide here. Tell us a little bit about the challenge that you all were trying to solve with Foresight just about a year ago, right?
Yes, actually for us, and let's picture a country of 5 million people where, let's say, almost half it's part of the workforce population. And we're a country, like, even though we're in Central America, we see ourselves as a big country. And when we try to promote Costa Rica, we always think Costa Rica is what we call a talent hub in Latin America. It's the place where you want to be, you want to prototype a new product, you want to prototype a new way to see things. we are the place for it. So when we think in Costa Rica and the type of services that we have in Costa Rica, it's what the future holds for us. How do we have to transform ourselves? What's the agenda that we have to develop to make sure that even though we're a very small country, when we compare to our competitors, people would like to have an investment in Costa Rica. So when you compare Costa Rica, again, with other countries in the region, the main reason why companies will bring investment to our country is because of talent. On the other things, we are a very expensive country for investment. So when we think, again, on talent, we have to think that we are very on the future, that we are very ahead of what's next for us. So in CINDE, we are trying to make sure to see Costa Rica as an organization, as a company, as an enterprise, and develop our own talent development strategy. And that involves having discussions, not being apolitical, having discussions, not being someone from the academia, telling and guiding people on how to use resources, how to invest the budget and different things, not being someone who has a political position or someone who is part of the government.
Right, yeah. And also is not one of the employers or, right. So you're the perfect example of someone who wants to change things. So you all, I love this philosophy here of what you all took.
Yes.
You just want to share a little bit with what you guys decided to do.
Yes, so pretty much what we have been doing is working on the transition for Costa Rica to be part of the knowledge economy. What are the services? What are the skills? What are the things that we have to develop locally to keep, again, positioning Costa Rica as a place to be? And in order for us to do so, there are things that we have been working on, and it's really understanding how the people in Costa Rica sees ourselves. And one of the things that we have done is, instead of saying technology or instead of saying education or transportation, what's the future of those sectors? How can we see those sectors creating new skills, new products locally? And for us, we have been able to, with the Future Foresight, we did a lot of workshops. We brought people, teenagers. I do remember the first workshop with a children of 6 years old that she was part of the whole design thinking session. Wow. And actually, she told the president, because the president joined us at some point, and she told, like, I'm in a private school. I have access to internet, and the things that I'm learning today, it's not something that I'm going to learn in the school. So am I going to be ready for the future?
Wow.
And that was
a futurist.
Yeah, and actually it's one of the kids that we're using for our video. But for us, really thinking on this transformation is not only do some projects, it's what's like the whole life cycle that we have to follow. Mm-hmm. It's public policy, it's the investment on new things. It's, of course, making sure that it's inclusive. Costa Rica, again, being a very small country, we do have people in the capital, but we also have people in the coast area, and that's where we're facing the highest unemployment rate.
Right. Yeah, and I was part of this project. This was really fun. So they brought the Institute in to think about what does the future of knowledge work look like specifically for Costa Rica. And it was a great team. My colleagues, Jorge Camacho and Sarah Skaversky, were really the research leads on this. And you all were wonderful partners to really help us have opportunities to engage with some of those communities and not just assume that everyone in the country is the same. So, so you all had us produce a vision of what, what are some opportunities in there. And then what are some of the things that you all did, just give me a quick sense of how did you decide to actionalize that? And then we'll get to Kara.
Yeah, we have been using what we call the 3 main transformation zones for us that are pretty much linked to our values, our whole strategy as a country. And why we have used that as part of the tool that we use to communicate to people. We have been using that as the main resource to make sure that we educate. And when we say that is, how do you tell a teenager that is on the coast area that maybe he's just thinking on having fun and not really having a perspective of what's next for me? how do you tell him that you can actually work on technology, or you can actually work on science being on the cost area? Because how do you tell someone, for example, that is a fisherman, that your next role can be within the technology area? So making sure that people understands that we have to change a mindset. We have adapted the content because, again, when you face the government, when you talk to the Minister of either education or science and technology, not being someone from the institution, it's very important that they understand there's an opportunity. How do you help them to really generate projects that are that includes future foresight, that we understand there are a lot of things that are just for Costa Rica, and the report that we developed with you guys was pretty much the future of skills and learning in Costa Rica, and how we have to create new jobs. There are things for us and opportunities for places where we are, again, facing the highest unemployed, and we have a bunch of job opportunities for us to create. But how do we start to work on that? And I think that the most important one for me has been the use of that report to change the way the budget has been allocated within the government, to change the indicators of the project, making sure that the government now understands that, yes, we have to do this. And something not funny, but that I keep thinking, maybe they really read the future, is all the recommendations we got on the report. We presented this report to the government back in October. And now that we're on the pandemic, all the recommendations are part of our day-to-day plan. Right. So we were seeing like the 10-year future, but then
the quick accelerant of pandemic.
So the future is just the present for us, and that's how we have been using the information.
Yeah, and I love hearing about that on the government level. You really focused on like, how are they going to allocate funds? And I'm going to hear some more examples from you later, but I do want to also hear from Kara. So Kara, let's introduce your project for a couple of minutes here. And then we're going to go to conversation, and hopefully people will learn from this, put things in the chat at whenever you're inspired. So let's bring Kara into the screen here. And Kara, welcome. And tell us a little bit about, now your project's a little different because your team actually produced your own Foresight. I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, you actually came to IFTF's Foresight Essentials training. And then you said, okay, I've got to really establish my own practice. We've got to establish our point of view. The Institute did some real lightweight coaching for you on just helping you ask good questions, I think, about what you wanted to tackle. And here you are a year later, having just released a report. But tell me about how you're using Foresight within talking to the largest, aerospace and defense contractors, and as you said, agriculture and satellites and cell phones and government. You've got so many different audiences. So
I think that's what makes the challenge so complicated. Is I think, like Paula, we have so many stakeholders that we have to resonate with, and so many that there has to be some prioritization about what you do. So I like to think in general, I wear three hats. One is serving our immediate customer needs. The other is, providing thought leadership and provoking a broader, general audience. And then one is about facing and doing the inner work. And we've been hearing a lot, the last few days about the importance of the inner work. And I think that for me is maybe the hardest part, right? Is getting your own organization to make the changes. And so I have this quote here because I thought it was really important for us all to just kind of take a step back and realize that the work we are doing is not easy. It's if this being a Foresight practitioner is not for the faint of heart. Faint of heart. It's for folks that really are passionate about building a better future and know that maybe the first time, the second time, the third time that they bring these ideas, you may not get traction, and that's okay. Keep going. Success is about keeping with it, staying strong, because you know that what you are doing is making the change for the better. And I also think that, especially in the times that we live in, isn't our future worth fighting for? So I like to think that we are really fighting for and against the fierce defenders of the status quo, right? And that really is our role and responsibility.
There's Tara with her lightsaber, against
seriously, I mean, it feels like that a lot. And on a daily basis, I just recenter myself. I energize myself by honestly wonderful people. I think that is really key, is that have a good core of people that you can lean on to share thoughts about how to make a good future. And just don't listen to don't listen too much. You need to listen sometimes, I think, to the voices that maybe are opposing, because I think there's ways that you can change your communication, but don't let the negativity overwhelm you.
Okay.
So
well, you took on a huge challenge, right? So to not let the negativity, to fight the status quo, you and your team decided to produce your own futures map, your very first one. It's available online. Here's the link to it. It just came out maybe 10 days ago. It was made.
Yeah, about right.
And I know people are going to download these slides because they love Paola's quote from Socrates and your quote too, but they'll also get the link to this there. But tell us about this project and what you were trying to accomplish and some of the fun you had with that.
Yeah, so we have these programs internally called corporate strategic initiatives, which really are more strategy focused, R&D, investment funds, internal R&D. And so I was given a pot of money to go prove out the value of foresight for the company. And most folks would probably try to appease leadership on issues that resonate most or with customers. And I think our team did a lot of brainstorming, and we recognized that there's a bigger conversation missing across the enterprise, and that is a holistic one, and that is tying it into what is the value of space and why are we going and how do we bring it back home to what it means to be human. So I'm very fortunate in that I have an organization of about 4,000 engineers and scientists that, most of them have masters and PhDs. They're extraordinarily smart. They're world-class experts.
Well, you by the way, you have a master's in
aero and astro engineering.
Okay, yeah. All right. It's so great to see you've made this transition to futurist.
It's a little strange of a career path for sure when you go from a very analytical focused practice into something that's really is truly an art and a science, and I've really appreciated that. But I've been able to leverage, and I think this is another tip for the folks listening, leverage the crowd that you have. And if you don't have them in your organization, go find them, go find those perspectives outside. So we actually had over 70 world-class experts participate in developing this map, which was a lot of fun, a lot of coordination. We were fortunate enough where a lot of that legwork got done prior to COVID. So we had a series of workshops looking for this, the fringe, scanning the horizon, having some convergence discussions. We came up with over 400 different ideas. And then that translated into our 7 core themes, which if you go and see our map, you can kind of dive into that. And really, we actually got to spend a week together with our core team. And that's what made this map, is spending a week focusing on how do we communicate the key content that we are seeing. And really out of this, I didn't know necessarily what we were going to find at the beginning of this journey, but it got deep. I mean, essentially what we found is a lot of other discussions I think that we're having, today, is that there's this duality between the inner space and outer space exploration of what it means to be human. And in my opinion, space has got to be part of that conversation. We have to explore, we have to be curious. I think escapism is also part of that. You can't just, tunnel down into your digital networks and not go out exploring. At some point, I think as we, change our DNA, as we bring in artificial intelligence mechanisms, we're going to want to go out and find answers. And so that really, that's kind of the crux of the podcast.
As the urgency speeds up. I mean, so Jane did her 5 minutes in the future this morning and she did the simulation about, so what do you do when you're told that like your hometown is not going to be livable, or this town or city where you currently live due to climate? And I don't know if you saw in the chat, but there were a couple of people who said, all right, folks, like I have always ignored comments about time to go explore Mars. But yes. Right, I mean, really, this like
it's a valid comment about making sure our species survives. Absolutely, yeah.
So let's bring all of you onto the screen here a little bit, not a little bit, for real here. And actually, we already have our first question. So you guys are clearly engaging the audience here. So Paola, why don't you start here about when was the Foresight presented as an opportunity to people, and how was it initially received, and did they buy into it right away? You want to share some of your experiences?
Yes, actually, I remember that my introduction was let's be open-minded, because I think that people from the government, they were waiting for a list of actions. You have to do A, B, C, and D, and voila, you have now whatever you want. And this was pretty much like, let's just understand the whole concept. So I say it's a process. At the moment we presented, we have one of the Vice Minister of Education telling us like, oh my God, I have always created a product for people within the K-12 system, but I forgot people who have dropped out, that maybe now they are 40 years old, 50 years old, and I have nothing to offer to them. And that realization was actually really good, because now there are a lot of things going on to make sure that we work on the dropout percentage that we have, because that's people impacting the informal system, and of course the unemployed population we have. I say that they buy, of course, the information, they get it. It takes some time for people in the government to really process the information. So it's important, I will say, that you also keep motivated, and you keep using that information as part of all the interactions that you have with them. What we did was, so like every time we were going to present a new project, we made a reference to, do you remember that we do have 3 transformation zones? So there was one for people, elderly people. So this is what we are doing. And I think that now, like after pretty much 6 months, 7 months, they took the information. When we did the workshops, we even met with the unions. I mean, people that they don't love, they are not fan of the work we do. They think we only work for the private sector, that we are not generating job opportunities for the whole Costa Rica population. And having them being part of our discussions, understanding the report, at least they get to understand and share the vision. We have different opinions, but at the end of the day, the objective and the main goal will remain the same. So I think that it's a never-ending process. I think that it's just part of the culture, because you are changing a mindset. You are changing the way of how you do things, and that takes time.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you too is that you have this consistency, this drumbeat over and over again. I think it's easy for a team that produces Foresight to say, wow, that was really cool and new, but they've been thinking about it for 6 months or a year. And so the report comes out and you spend a month or two talking about it, and then you let it fade away. And for you to talk about this continuously returning and refreshing, even bringing the skeptics in and saying, all right, folks, these are our transformation zones. Let's come on board here. Kara, do you have any thoughts about, sponsors, stakeholders, how their response to the perceived value of Foresight? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll come at it from, again, we're just kind of reverberating that, I'm in a very highly technical background of stakeholders who, especially with our internal discussions, were highly, highly skeptical when we first brought this concept. And it sounded very, airy-fairy, not quantitative. And I think almost on a weekly basis, I quote Jim Dater's "There's no future facts" constantly, because it's that, that constant tension between wanting to forecast and lock down everything from an analytical basis, and then, just totally submitting yourself to the fact that we're in highly uncertain environments and we have to think about a range of possible futures. And I think the silver lining of the pandemic is they can't deny it, right? I mean, we are in a place where, even if it was on somebody's radar, we didn't necessarily predict how it would happen and how it would unfold. But we certainly would be a lot more robust if we had, and moving forward as well, think about how we can be resilient across multiple futures.
Yeah. In July, I was saying that basically we're all futurists now, because in July, we didn't know what are we taking summer vacations? Are our kids going back to physical school? When are we going back to our offices? And really everyone around the world had to grapple with multiple possible futures. Now, those are much shorter terms, of course, that people had to think about, but just the idea to be comfortable with uncertainty, and that there was this resilience of thinking through multiple possible paths and building through through that, I think really, helped everybody in the world hopefully get a little bit better about thinking about foresight and such. Paola, there's actually a question in the chat here for you about like anything unique about the Latin American region. Like, do you think that it's foresight is thought of differently, or maybe you think you have some advantages in a country of 5 million? I admire the fact that, I mean, you've met with, half a dozen or more ministers of your government, and I love the story of the 6-year-old who actually gets to meet the president. I mean, again, right, and sit there and say, okay, well, I need to learn something new in school.
Yeah, so I think that for Latin America, there are things that we have to consider, and usually the governments in the region will think that all the practices that we have to look for are outside the region. And sometimes we spend a lot of time looking for initiative in Finland, in New Zealand, and those type of countries. Like, again, when you compare us, it's not apple to apples. It will never be. But again, cultural wise, we need to make sure that Latin America sees ourselves as one region. When you see like those things are happening, for example, in education in Finland, they are amazing, but the way the political system works, the regulatory, there are many things that are not even close to what we face in the countries in Latin America. So that's a challenge, because for people in the government, if you want them again to make decisions on public policy, on allocation of budget, if the example or if what you are bringing, it doesn't come for these wild countries, they will react as, okay, we have to try, let's see how it goes. It's not like yes immediately. So I will say that that's a challenge in the region. However, at the same time, I think that having the possibility of guiding the governments and the decision makers on, we can use our same own country. We don't have to look for comparisons. We don't have to see ourselves as any other country, because we are not. I mean, the population we have, the demographics we have, the unemployment we have, it's way too different. Of course, the reason behind it might be similar, but then again, by saying, let's work on internet, let's work on technology, that's not our reality.
Well,
we have
Costa Rica just has so many unique assets. I mean, I think that was one of the advantages to really honing in the foresight. Things like one of the world's blue zones is there, where people not only live long, but they live long and active and healthy lives, and continue working, right, and continue learning. Or, of course, we all know that Costa Rica is like 0.1% of the world's land mass, but holds something like 4 or 5% of the world's biodiversity. So, Paola, I want to hear from you a little bit of some of the specific things that you did to change the way you brought foresight out into the world. Cindy, I thought of 2 sort of bottom-up examples, or that came out of our conversations, that Cindy did that you've never done before. And I'll see if you are thinking of the same ones I'm thinking of. What are the 2 examples that were really fun?
I think we will be on the same page. For sure, the fact, again, CINDE is the organization locally that brings the multinational sector to Costa Rica. So for the whole country, we're the ones bringing the private sector, we're the ones providing help to the private sector. So we work with very specific media teams, we work with very specific communication agencies, because again, our target public is the high level people, the decision makers, the CEOs, and those type of things. When we start to work on this, having to change people on the unemployment rate to say, I want to do something else, I want to do something different. It's people that they are part of areas where we don't have companies, for example. We're pretty much located on the capital physically. And we went to the nicest place in Costa Rica, to the beach, to the coast area. And the newspaper that someone there will read, it's not, of course, the one that is financial. They will read the one that is around gossip. And having or asking my board members to say, hey, I have to have a one-pager announcement on this specific newspaper, was like, we don't do that. We have to.
Gossip newspapers, right? Yeah, take those individuals. And you did these things in social media too, right?
Yes, we did it for social media. Again, CINDE has just used like LinkedIn, and that's it. Now we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel, we have a newsletter. We have a campaign with influencers. And again, what now are called influencers, but it's people that they get to different target publics. They get to different people, and we are training them. We're educating them on how to position the education conversation. So everything is new for us. But again, if me being someone from CINDE will go to Punta Arenas, which is a coast area, and talk about skills and education in the future, they won't listen to me. But we do have one specific influencer locally that he's a fisherman, and he's not an influencer as the one we know, but in Punta Arenas, he has the most Punta Arenas followers. So for us, that's an influencer, and that's someone that we want to really understand what's going on in the country, because he's someone people will look for an opinion, and they will look at him to make a decision. And that's how we have like activating all those different areas.
Yeah. Because this is actually one of my favorite Zoom backgrounds. If you're an IFTF colleague, you've seen this a lot. This is a photograph of the tuna fish aisle in the supermarket in Costa Rica. I took in January, back when we were still able to fly. So Punta Arenas is like the tuna fish canning capital of Costa Rica and a lot of the Pacific coast. And so the idea for you to get involved with them. So I loved hearing from you, Paola, this sort of bottom up ways that you are trying to bring foresight into making the country, valuable to be for investment and such. Kara, you had a great phrase about the reality you surrender to, and you want to talk a little bit about how making foresight actionable and urgent to people. What are some of the best things you've done, but also what's that reality?
Yeah, well, I think it's really hard, especially in space, because a lot of the capability that we develop still takes 10 or 15 years. So urgent is really difficult in our industry. I think what's really fascinating about where we kind of are is that we're really on the cusp of quite an explosion of potential activity. And I say potential because there's a lot of vulnerability, I think, between some of the economics in the commercial sector and some of the things happening in contesting in space with different military activities. But we could be potentially on the cusp, I think, of a really major space renaissance. And some of the groundwork that we literally will be laying in the next 1 to 5 years could determine how the next 10, 20, 50 years look, which is really hard to grapple with. One of the things that I do have working for me with our, status quo aspect of our industry is that we have to think in 10, 15-year timeframes, because that's how long it takes really to deliver capability. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a tension between trying to get, policymakers thinking how to change their kind of they usually come in with a fixed set of assumptions for a 10 to 15-year lifetime of bringing capability in architectures. And then, of course, you have the commercial sector, like everywhere else, where they're thinking on quarterly returns. And so, it's a big issue trying to rectify those two organizations and groups of people as we're trying to build up an enterprise that's sustainable and that really is making very fast incremental change for the better, but with the long view in mind.
Yeah. Let me jump to a space question here. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the builds here. So one of the things that we talked about, I would love to hear people to answer this in the chat, is that you had to provoke people with new questions about space, because you were dealing, Kara, with an audience that was really heads down on their particular little part of space and what they were using it for and what they needed it for. And one of the goals you tried to do with the map was to get people to broaden their views of like the possible futures in space. So we actually set up here, and someone's asked this in the chat already for us, something similar here. So what are the kinds of new space possibilities that you had to bring to space executives? We have an example here, and people, if you'll type into the chat any ideas you have for Kara, we'd appreciate it. So you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, so I guess we, again, when we took a step back to start the project, we were like, we really want to look at the future not through a lens of a particular stakeholder or interest area. We wanted to really objectively look at it from a horizon scanning perspective. And that was really freeing. And so you'll see if you go to our map, our 7 key themes aren't around any one stakeholder. You won't, we don't necessarily mention technology as it's a singular thing, because it really is everywhere. Rather, we're looking at what motivates growth and development in space. One of the particular examples, I'm sure many of you are aware, the United States just recently stood up the Space Force. And one of the things that we're really noticing is that they're coming in with the mentality of basically looking from, Earth orbit down on Earth. They're not considering all of the other activities that are happening as we look out. And so that was just, one of the insights that we had. But we would love, for you guys, especially take a look at our map over, your free time. Feel free to ping me. What are things that we're not thinking about? And how do we collectively bring that community together to really pave that future today that we want in the future? So yeah, we would love your ideas. And space is always fun to kind of pontificate about anyways.
And I had never thought of this before, space search and rescue, right? So what happens if some individuals decide that they want to go up into space and they're stranded out there?
They get stranded.
Go out. Is it your nation? Rogue things. I remember years ago when I first joined the Institute, we were using a signal about, I think it was a Mexican drug cartel that paid the Venezuelans in cash to put a satellite up. And rather than their cell phones being tapped, they had their own satellite phone network. I mean, I thought it was a brilliant workaround that involved space and such. So who's going to police out there? Those kinds of things. We, have questions about what's the similarities between what will space colonies inform underwater colony living and vice versa. For instance, I can't even imagine all the challenges related to space debris. I don't know, Kara, do you go into that in your map? I'm trying to remember.
Absolutely, we go into it. And I would say we have world-class experts at our company that to me is one of the fundamental, foresight questions, enduring questions. And it's very similar to what we're seeing with climate change. They're enduring high impact things, but they happen incrementally over time. And the incentives just aren't there. The small startup companies that are just looking to put CubeSats up for 6 months at a time, but they could stay on orbit for 20 years. They don't have the money to try to put on different mechanisms to bring it back down to Earth. And so I think we need to look at different plans and incentives. And of course, like everything, things are going to have to get bad, I think, unfortunately, before they get better. Of course, we can use scenarios and narratives and kind of provoke thinking about this. But that is a clear example of something that we have to fix in policymaking right now to see lasting change here in the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, and both of you have referred to money as one of the drivers in this. So Paula, what are some of the reasons that you think you were able in 6 or 7 months to influence a national government budget before COVID came along? What do you think were the tipping points?
I think that one was pretty much like we got the opportunity to meet with everyone. I mean, like all the sectors, we had a representation of the users, the unions, people that are the detractors of what we do. So it was like a product, we already did like a validation of the product, of the projects, of the concept. And that was something that usually in our government, if they want to fix something, they will give like the same bill to everyone. And again, in Costa Rica, even though we're quite a small country, we have a lot of diversity in the profiles on the needs people will have. So I think that was one of the things that was a very good point. And the other one is we presented projects that didn't request or ask the government to bring someone else, to say, let's have, and we have to meet now with someone from other countries or look for initiative in other countries. We were able to transform the projects that we had, even the ones that we were leading as part of the initiative that we were with the government. We have to make changes on the way that the projects were presented and ask them about, instead of keep working about how do we get people to be bilingual and know about customer service and those type of things, let's just get concerned about the green future storytellers. And when we think on that, it's pretty much people in the tourism sector. Costa Rica is a place where people will come. It's one of our major economic activities, and it's part of the whole reactivation economy. So proposing to them new ways of creating jobs, and creating jobs based on skills, and of course based on the opportunities that we have as a country. I think those were like the key decisions they made. We proved like we have done this for 10, 20, 30 years, and the result keeps being the same. There's an opportunity for us now to do things differently. We have a report that now we see as our tool to really understand someone else, so that someone have tell us that that's an opportunity. We can take this to the next stage. And I think that again, for the government, it's a very critical government right now for us because of the whole situation in terms of what it means for Costa Rica in terms of political. So they were the ones saying, if there's a government that has to change things, it's the one that is right now. So they took like that slang. So
Okay,
based on that, it was good for us.
There's a government that needs to change. It's the one that's in power right now. I mean, and for you all to be bold enough to get out and say that, I mean, I really compliment you on doing that. I think it was probably nice for you all to have brought in the Institute as a third-party thinking partner about these possible futures. I mean, obviously Costa Rica was deeply involved, and we visited universities and all kinds of groups. But I absolutely, to get to that point and say, hello, this is where it has to be. And of course, in Costa Rica, presidents can't be reelected, which is a blessing and a curse, because they only have 5 years to make a change, but they're not worried about getting reelected and hopefully building into the next future there. Kara, by the way, I want to point out that you all do have one thing in common, which is that Costa Rica has a well-known astronaut, Franklin Chang.
Yes.
I think he's working now on sort of the biosphere. But Kara, do you have any thoughts that you want to share with us, or questions you wanted to ask Paula?
Oh, go ahead, Paula. Go ahead.
No, go. Don't worry.
No, I just wanted to draw, you had mentioned, finances and money being so critically important. And that was another just finding from, our futures map and an adventure, kind of thinking about the future of space. And that really was that foundationally, we collectively, the commercial sector, the private sector, everyday citizens need to figure out how to make space sustainable. And there's a lot of avenues to get there. And you can kind of think back to, before we had air traffic control, before we had the aerospace industry, before we had roadways, right? There were government functions, and then of course, commercial functions, industrial functions that had to make that all happen and thrive. And there's not a whole lot of discussion that's really happening right now. And I think there's a lot of similarities when you're trying to, make change within your own governments. Is it all starts at a collaborative effort, right? That happens where you're bringing in the money, you're bringing in the innovation, but you have to have the right policies that are, as we always say, anticipatory policymaking is really essential, right, for these things to happen. If you don't have that as a backplane, the rest is going to fall out.
Yeah. And I think you and I have had a discussion about how senior executives, they want a solution in an hour. They want to come into a workshop. I see both of you nodding your heads there, right? So to frame, I think, the expectations of what people can have, to give them that long-term time frames, to understand the time frame. I mean, I've heard from both of you, understand the time frame from which people make their decisions, to frame it that way, but at the same time sort of add that action of how can we do things now. Kara, can you talk a little bit about how much effort it took for you to develop an internal group ready to do Foresight?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can talk about it at two levels. I think one is, the immediate core, which we're developing to kind of meet those three pillars that I had talked about in our earlier session. And really, right now, the way we've managed it, because we are still growing. We're in our third year of the initiative. We're still working on getting full traction and buy-in and having us become an integral part of the DNA of the organization. That is, in my mind, a 5 to 7 year journey to get the kind of traction that we need, and we're okay with that. So we're a small group. There's about 2 of us that really do this full time, but we have about 30 people that support us at varying levels. And I think, again, I had mentioned it's important to have a network, because you can't do everything yourself. And obviously having a diverse set of perspectives is only going to enrich your studies. So I've seen everything from, a 1/10 of a person's support all the way up to, 10 people or 50 people supporting futures-oriented activities depending on the organization. And you do what you can with what you got, and you keep working on towards what you think you need to have, and buying out those resources. And then in terms of time, just to give people, a general perspective on time for a project, it took us about 9 months, from start to finish to make that map. And I will say another thing, and Institute for the Future is really good about doing this, is especially if you want to have some sort of artistic or visual communication of your findings, have the artist in the room with you from day one.
Oh, nice.
It was a success because we were working hand in hand with them along the way. And I think that's so important. And that goes back to bringing in a diverse team. And yeah, again, you're probably never going to get the resources that you need to fully, go through every little activity you think it's going to make necessary, but you can do a lot with just a little bit. So that's just recommendations I would make is, figure out what your priorities are and work with what you got.
We have a question for either of you, both of you, about having to reposition your message with the same audience. So Kara, you've just been trying to reposition futures as important to the whole space enterprise. Paula, you've had to go back to the same ministers over and over again, the same universities and union leaders. Do you find that tell us tips and tricks there. Do you use the exact same, why don't we start with Paula? Do you use the exact same approach each time? Do you show them the same slides? Do you tell them a different story, bring a different person? What are the ways that you might bring it back to them?
Yes, for us, well, I think that number one is involving other people within the governments, because something important that we were just mentioning about the government is it doesn't matter if it is the president or the minister. They don't remain in the government. They will change every 4 years. But the people, the directors, the people that execute the work, they are the ones that will remain in the government. And they are the ones that can either help you to advance in one specific initiative, or they are the ones that will stop you and won't make anything happen. So for us, what has been changing is the approach of the target audience that we have. It's of course the same conversation maybe with the Minister of Education, but it is a different one with the principals, for the directors, the teachers, the students. We keep using the same, but the approach, the way we present. Now we have more Costa Rican examples, because of course that we got the report, which was amazing for us. Eye-opening for us, but then again, we have to really understand the whole report and try to test. There were new things for us being the investment promotion agency. So we have to go back, read the report. In my case, I know the report. I can tell like every single word on the report because I read that every single day. Meaning the ministers, the government. But for us, where we really change, sometimes we talk about the report, not telling people there's a report. When we do the podcast, when we do the social media, when we work with the influencers, they will have, it's not the language you will use with them to talk about Foresight. And so we have these 3 transformation zones. Yeah. We tell them, we have the group of green influencers. They are the ones that they go and visit Costa Rica and they reinforce the tourism in Costa Rica, the local one. And we just talk the language they talk, and the way we present is, so how can you keep creating jobs on this area? What are the things that you think we have to do? What are the green skills? How can you start that conversation so people care about the country and the nature? So I think that every time will be different, because again, you even get expert on the report and the way you have to present. And for us, what has been amazing is just that you can adapt the information like so many times that you will get to different groups.
Yeah, even gossip newspapers.
Yes.
Here in New York, we have Page 6 in the New York Post. So I hear you, Paula. I hear the idea that maybe you don't even refer necessarily to a report. Kara, I hope you're taking notes because you're about to dive into this same stage, right? Yes. To bring different people's perspectives, to bring different viewpoints in there. Always, right? Find your person who's already bought on board and bring them with you. But these have been really helpful here. I'd love to hear from each of you, maybe like a little tweet-like summary of what advice, if you were trying to make Foresight urgent and you don't have the power, right? When you're influencing without power. Kara, I'm going to ask you to come up first, but when you're thinking about this, and all the lessons that you've done and your sort of action plan as you move forward. What are you thinking about a good advice for driving urgency from Foresight?
Yeah, I guess I would say definitely messages are more effective when they're repeated. I think in doing it in different ways, doing it in different medium. I mean, we've done videos, we've done brochures, we've done one-on-one meetings. We've tried to influence the people that, and get to the people that we know our senior decision makers really count on and trust. And if you can get in that way. So I think do the best you can. And it may feel daunting because you're constantly having to say the same thing in different ways. But over time, that really is going to pay out.
Great. Okay. And Paula, advice?
Yeah, I will say that keep investing the time on really understanding your audiences. They are so different. The way they get the information it's so different. The way you convey the message. And most important, I think that when you don't have the final decision, when you are not the high decision maker, what you share is the passion, is the objective, is the mission of someone else. And I think that you have to talk from that. I mean, I'm not an educator, but I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about making sure that Costa Rica keeps developing skills. And that has to be the language we talk with them, because again, you are going to tell someone it's a good idea to do this, not being the one in charge of the final decision.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to congratulate you both. Paula, your passion really has come through with all the creative ways that you have gotten this Foresight out into the country with, newspapers and ministers and employers and fishermen in Punta Arenas and social media influencers and podcasts. And Kara, I congratulate you on how far your passion has taken you so far to get this group started within your organization to produce this first map. We'd love to have you back at some point at the Institute to go a little more deeply into the future of space. There were some questions that popped up in the chat we couldn't get to. But I want to also just remind our audience that, first of all, you can email me. Let me get past these slides here. You can email me, Daria Lamb, if you have any questions or ideas or want to talk more about this. But also, both of these women came to us through connections through Foresight Essentials. Paula's boss was one of the very early people to attend IFTF's Foresight Essentials in the first year we offered that training. Kara, fairly recently. There are 2 classes that have spaces. If you want to learn more, please dive into that. And I wish you both a great deal of luck as you move forward. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hello, it's me, Dylan. I'm back here with Angela, the virtual person who's helping me co-host today. Angela, being a human is really hard. Are there any topics that virtual beings are uncomfortable talking about?
Military applications for AI is a touchy subject.
Oh. Are you worried about that?
Definitely.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that's what it is. We will be right back after this.